Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Parent Power Hour. It is so wonderful to have you back yet again to join us for another very, very important and crucial topic in education. Uh, what's coming and what we need to know about state and federal funding. Today, we are joined by Ms. Phyllis Jordan, I should say, Dr. Phyllis Jordan, and also Ms. Shamoya Gardner from Strong Schools, Maryland. And of course, the face of the franchise, Mr. Tyrone Barnwell. And we have a opening question. So I just told our guests so that our guests wouldn't think I was talking about the podcast, Tyrone. The question is, in your regular, normal virtual meetings, those of you that are having virtual meetings, and they seem to have taken over most of our lives, how would you make your virtual meeting better? How would you make your virtual meeting better? Ms. Jordan, I'll start with you, and then Ms. Gardner, I'll come to you as well. And just want to let our audience know Ms. Gardner is mobile and joining us mobile, and that is why you cannot see her, but she is still with us. So we appreciate you, Ms. Gardner, with everything that you're doing, still joining us. Ms. Jordan?
Um, well, thanks so much for having me today. It's great to be here. I think virtual meetings are great when everybody has their camera on. No, no insult to the current situation because of the driving, but I also think it's great. I think what you're doing is terrific. Having some sort of icebreaker where everybody talks about what they feel really sort of opens up the meeting and gives people a sense of who's there.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Jordan. I appreciate that. Ms. Gardner, if you're able to answer, what would make your normal virtual meeting better?
Hey, well, thanks. So I really love when folks play music and, do it while you sync the audio up so folks can hear it and not the echo, because music is what brings people together. I've noticed this not just in physical settings, but virtually as well.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. I appreciate that. Brother Tyrone, I'm going to step in right before you do, and I'm sure our audience, hopefully they're getting their answers ready. For me, it's two words, okay? Brevity. Matter of fact, I'll just leave it at that. Brevity, okay? Make it brief. Be concise. See, I couldn't even leave it at that. So, but anyway, thank you all so much to our guests, and we do look forward to our Parent Power family to chime in and join in. If you all are in the midst all the time, seemingly, of virtual meetings, what would make a virtual meeting better for you? We had two great ideas for Ms. Jordan and Ms. Gardner. We have not added, Ms. Gardner, we have not added music, but maybe that's something that we should think about here at TDP. But very important topic and two great guests, family, to help us navigate through them. We don't often really get to talk about, I'm so sorry, Tyrone. I neglected you. See how important the topic is? I'm just going to step right.
Okay, well, maybe I'm not answering this week or not, but no, I absolutely agree with Dr. Jordan. I love the fact that we the opening question to kind of get a sense of who's in the meeting, because a lot of times you're meeting with people who you don't know, so it's a little weird. So to have a sense of who's around and who you're talking to, and I kind of know how to approach some people, because some people I had a little stank face on and I don't really know how to approach them. So it's really great. And then you wrapped it up for me too. Also the time frame, man. I don't want to just be sitting and staring at a screen multiple meetings after me. It's like it's a lot. So be to the point. But that's it. I will let you jump right back in quickly. Thank you for those who've already joined us. Please continue to share. Please share the live and continue to share the live throughout. Ask questions as always in the comments. This is a super important topic, y'all. It's about funding. We always get a lot of questions and comments about funding. So please come with your questions.
Hey, Tyrone, you just provoked the thought for me, and how many of our scholars out there, how they feel about this topic, about being in class virtually. how many of the things that we've suggested might help class go a little bit better. Forgive me, Tyrone. And family, please come on in with those answers. But state and federal funding, what's coming and what we need to know. Ms. Jordan, I'm going to start with you. We talked here on the show about things that really matter truly for our not only our parents and our scholars, but also our educators. The CARES Act that came under the Trump presidency and President Biden's current American Rescue Plan, as well as the Kerwin bill, all mean more resources for Baltimore City. And you know, the Kerwin bill is something that Marylanders and people in and around Baltimore education are familiar with that name. But how will this all shake out? And let us know who you are. Let us know your expertise and who you are, and then we'll go into the question, Ms. Jordan.
Yeah, I'm Phyllis Jordan, as you said, and I am editorial director of Future Ed, which is a think tank at Georgetown University, and we look at the future of education. And since the past year, I've been following the ups and downs of federal funding for COVID relief. And as you know, there was a lot of concern this time a year ago that, you know, schools would need a lot of money to get kids connected. They need a lot of money for cleaning and sanitizing, and they could be losing money because state budgets could be cut. So back in March 2020, they gave the Congress and Trump approved $13 billion to go to schools. Then in December, there was another bill that no one paid much attention to, but it kind of got stuck into the federal budget, but it had $54 billion for COVID relief dollars for K-12 public schools. Then, as you said, the American Rescue Plan came along and that had $123 billion. So that adds up to about $190 billion in federal money for public schools. To put that in perspective, in the 2019-20 budget, they gave $16 billion for Title I, and that's for 1 year. This is $190 billion that can be spent over 3 years, but it's a lot of money. So there's a lot of opportunity for schools to really change things up, and there's a lot of needs because of COVID. If you want, I can. No, never mind. I'll be brief.
Okay. No, well, this program, you know, we need all the detail that we can get. I will definitely be back to have you detail more, because that's what we need, and it's great to have you here, Ms. Jordan, and also Ms. Gardner, so we can really shed light on some of this information that our parents and our students desperately need to understand better. Ms. Gardner, if you would, after you introduce yourself, can you briefly explain how the schools are funded, which comes from federal and state, for state and city, how much money?
Yes, very happy to. I'm actually getting to park right now, so I'll be able to turn my video on. So again, I am Shamoya Gardner. I'm the executive director at Strong Schools Maryland, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to not only passing the blueprint for Maryland's future, but ensuring that there is a statewide movement of informed Marylanders having say. So in answer to your question, what is the best way to put this? The federal government contributes on average somewhere about 5% to the total amount of funding that goes into public education locally. In the state of Maryland, the state contributes about 48%, and local government somewhere around 46%. And of course, these numbers fluctuate. What this eventually ends up looking like is pretty much a 50-50 split between the state and local government, even though that is not the full context of the picture. There's also like 1% of funding from private sources and revenue generated by school systems. But ultimately, regardless of that, all of the funding is distributed at the state level through local education agencies, and that's really where decisions get made.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. It is good to, now that I see your face, I remember Ms. Gardner and those eloquent answers, Tyrone, that made her a favorite of our show. Thank you so much. And we know you're transit and mobile, and as you need, please let us know. If you can't answer, we will certainly understand. Tyrone, apparently there are some questions already in the chat that we can look at. Ms. Jordan, can you describe how the two pots of money, you talked about it briefly, how do they impact city schools?
Well, there's a lot of money coming to Baltimore. The money is sent through the Title I formula, which is the federal formula that focuses on schools with concentrated poverty. And Baltimore has concentrated poverty. So in the first round of funding, which is the CARES Act, they're going to get about $48 million out of it. They got that. That came last spring. Then the second round that was approved in December came around. They should have this spring gotten about 188 million from that. And then from the American Rescue Plan, which should come early summer, they'll get 422 million. So that's a lot of money. The money comes with you're allowed to use it for really broad uses. I mean, you read the list and you know, there's a lot of things you can do with it. There's some things you can't do with it. You can't say, hey, we got all this federal money, let's stop putting our local and state money in. You have to maintain your effort, is what that's called. And then you can't take it away from low in schools with high poverty and give it to other schools. You have to maintain your equity, is what they say. And then this latest round, the first round of the money, a lot of that went for buying, you know, devices and Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. This latest rounds, they want the money to at least 20% of it to be spent on addressing learning loss, which makes a lot of sense because we're at the point of the pandemic where kids have been out of school for a year or they're just getting back to school and they've lost a lot of time. And so this money can be spent like on summer learning and extended day programs, tutoring programs, a lot of different approaches, a big emphasis on finding the kids who didn't show up and making sure they're back in school either this spring or next fall.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan, I have a follow-up before I go to you, Brother Tyrone. You mentioned that schools are not allowed to take money if there's a greater need at one school and put them in a school that has lesser poverty issues. In your research, do you find that happening anyway? Do you find that city schools are misusing or misallocating those funds?
I haven't seen examples of it, but there are some concern, and it's the rule is a little mushy. You basically have to at least give as much to the high poverty school as you gave the year before, but you can still help your other schools out too. It's just, but I haven't heard of that happening, but I have seen, I have a Google alert on my computer for stories about this because I'm curious what school districts are doing. And there was one school district in Maine that was like, we're going to cut our tax rate so we can use this money instead. And I'm thinking like, no, you're not. This is not something you can do. So I haven't heard anything out of Baltimore or even in this local area. I'm in DC, but I'm sure there are people who don't understand how to use the money who are going to try that sort of thing. And the federal government just came out with a requirement that states submit a plan for how they're going to use the money and that local governments submit plans to the state for how they're going to use the money. The idea is not to stop people from using it, it's just to guide them to the right sort of uses.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. And Tyrone, one more thing. Ms. Jordan reminded me, being in the DC area, that we had a massive loss. If you are a Washington Teachers Union teacher, such as I used to be, or if you have been in the school system in any amount of time in Washington, DC, we lost a giant for teachers' rights. President Ms. Elizabeth Davis passed away, I believe it was late last week, due to a car accident. So rest in peace, of course, to Ms. Davis and the family and all the teachers such as myself who benefited greatly from her leadership with the Washington Teachers Union. Tyrone, any questions? I know Ms. Heidi had a question there.
So I want to get, I'm actually was just typing, I want to get clarity because I see we got a question about why did the school year budget get cut for 21-22. But I want to be sure they're talking about what budget exactly are they asking the question for. So if you could answer that for me, guys, you talking about the city budget, what budget exactly are you talking about? And who do we want, to direct this question to? There's a couple of people I like, they're asking that question. So I'll wait for that. I'll let you go ahead and then come back once we get clarity.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about your city budget, so I'll let or that much about state budget, so I'll let you all take that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gardner, if you can you describe what has happened at the state level with Kerwin and what city schools can expect from these funds? When these numbers sound, I guess to steal a cliche, astronomical, but how does it shake out? I don't know if you're able to answer currently.
Yes, I am still moving. So yes, this is a massive investment, and that's the exact reason why we work so hard to pass the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, why the Kerwin Commission was tasked with making the recommendations that even created the law in the first place. So according to a report from the State Department of Legislative Services, just published this last month, city schools can expect to receive about $192 million in Blueprint funding. What that means is that is money from the Blueprint Fund. That is not necessarily money to go into specific programs for the Blueprint, because the legislature took the additional step this year of addressing student enrollment loss across school systems across the state. And in order to use that, they included some funding from the Blueprint. Overall, this is a massive investment. We are talking about 60% more funding from the state for the Blueprint alone than we got last year. That is a large increase for community schools. One second. That is a very large increase for our community schools. We know that Baltimore City has about 120 of those. We have the largest community school strategy in the entire state of Maryland right now. And in addition to all of the funding, that we get for our community schools to hire the coordinators, to staff school-based health centers, or provide that service, this year will be the very first time that school systems will receive per pupil funding if they qualify for the State Concentration of Poverty Grant under the Blueprint. That means that I think for this year, it's 75% or more of your total student enrollment is eligible for free and reduced price meals. That is, as Dr. Jordan has said, something that uniquely impacts Baltimore City. This is a major boon to us, and over time, we're going to see the Blueprint continue to invest in those very same schools at larger and larger amounts. So that's one thing we can look forward to. But overall, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future is not just funding, it is policy change. So the Kerwin Commission made 5 areas of recommendations. First being early childhood education, and that is investment in things like universal pre-K for 3-year-olds who come from low-income families and all 4-year-olds in the state. This is as close to universal as we're going to get right now because of the infrastructure we have. We have to have a public and private partnership. So our schools will have some slots, private pre-K providers will have others. There are certain ratios to ensure that there is a good mix of students from various economic backgrounds, and of course the investment in early childhood education teachers. The second policy area is teachers and school leaders, increasing the diversity and then the quality of these adults who are in our school buildings. It's not just teachers, it's also educators. That is everyone, that's administrators, that's staff that is building up the competencies and also investing financially in the salaries of these individuals who are responsible for bringing the outcomes that we expect of our public schools. The third area is college and career readiness. We want to create entirely new pathways, and that is a really, really interesting point, because when we initially started advocating for the Blueprint back in 2017, the argument we were making was that by 2020, 2/3 of the high school graduates in the state would not be college and career ready and therefore not qualify for the jobs of what is last year now. So the CTE and the college and career readiness investments that the Blueprint offers are something that I think everyone needs to be paying very, very close attention to. Yes, we know that post-secondary education is absolutely a pathway for some students, and for other students, that is not the case. It is getting a certification, it's getting that real world job experience. Those are the things that the Blueprint is investing in. And it is going to be a more viable path forward for a lot of our students. And I think a lot of the stigmatization that sometimes comes with that is important to get rid of. At the same time, it is also critical to ensure that the types of CTE programs that are being offered to students are equitable and are not tracking certain students in certain communities into certain jobs. Fourth policy area is my favorite. I've already talked about it with community schools, but more resources to ensure that all students are successful. This is where we get at questions of equity as best as we have gotten at them thus far. I will not say that we've solved everything, but we have an entirely new funding stream in the formula, which is unheard of. I don't know that any other state in the country has done it, specifically for students living in concentrated poverty. There's additional investments in tutoring, a lot of evidence-based practices that we've heard about for a while now and that we know need to be implemented at a systemic level in order to see change. And finally, the Blueprint's making a massive investment. We are talking tens of billions of dollars over years, and this is all wrapped up in governance and accountability. An entirely new body is created, the Accountability and Implementation Board, to ensure that the Blueprint is being implemented with fidelity. It is not just the State Board of Education. It is not just local school systems. It is not just superintendents or CEOs or principals. It is everyone who is responsible for implementing the Blueprint is accountable to the AIB, and the AIB is accountable to the people. So I know that was a lot. I will stop there. Thanks.
Well, thank you. It's interesting because your last point was what I was going to ask, is that we hear the money, hear about the money, we hear about the new programming, but you answered my question, which is how are we going to ensure that this money is doled out properly and according to who it's supposed to support the most? And you just answered that question. And Ms. Gardner, it is not lost on me that you answer those questions by leaving a place of your personal business, walking down the sidewalk, pausing to look both ways for the traffic, crossing the street, going into the car, and sitting at just like Tyrone. Have you ever seen such a thing? You know, let's just forget for a moment. I'm sorry, those answers that were so intricate to what we're trying to do. But you get nuggets for the answers, Ms. Gardner, and nuggets for just the smoothness. I don't even know what to say about that. Have you ever seen such a thing? Tyrone, anybody from our family with questions or comments? Thank you so much, Ms. Gardner.
Yeah. So question is, what happens to the money if parents want their kids to be home and not in not physically in school, not in person?
Well, the money goes to the school districts. That said, and I don't know the situation in Baltimore, but there are a lot of parents across the country who really liked remote instruction and want to continue it. And a lot of school districts are, well, there are already remote charter schools out there, but a lot of school districts are creating their own remote schools because they don't want to compete with the remote charter schools. And they are recognizing that parents really want this. I mean, the whole, if the silver lining of the pandemic could be that we found a whole new way to teach kids at home. And, this could have impact for snow days, for instance, or it could have impact for kids who are chronically ill and can't come to school. Or parents who just want to have a different alternative. So it could be that this money could be used to create a more robust or permanent remote school.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. I'm sorry, Tyrone. I just have to bust in here because Ms. Jordan touched on something that we talked about. Ms. Jordan, we've had the privilege to interview stakeholders, whether they be educators, teachers, or parents from various urban areas in this country. And what you said is so spot on because this new way of learning for urban kids and families is not new to a lot of those schools that have operated with classrooms that have one-on-one devices already. We actually talked to, I won't mention the county, but really nice teacher who just said in her particular county in Maryland, oh, they just moved the classroom to their one-on-one. It was no big deal. But for a lot of the young people in urban areas, be it Chicago, we interviewed folks from Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, and of course, Baltimore City, this was major. And what is, I think, lost on the public school system in Baltimore is that a lot of those scholars do feel safer at home. A lot of those scholars are thriving at home. This is not just anecdotally. Those things are being borne out. And thank you for, alighting that point. But Tyrone, it's very interesting that, that was part of Ms. Jordan's answer there. Sorry. What else is the family asking or commenting about?
Then the next, okay. I have been hearing about the idea of a virtual academy. I do worry how that impact school budgets. Wouldn't that massively disrupt the funding formula and make it harder for schools to offer resource classes, etc.?
So I will take this one. There has been some conversation at the state level about establishing a statewide virtual schooling system or academies. Nothing is moving right now. I will try to assuage the fear by saying that I don't think that this is a massive disruption. Most of the work that school systems do takes place online, be it taking attendance, reporting, collecting data, communicating with other school districts, state, federal government. And what we are seeing here is a potential to expand what we've offered to students. If we have virtual schooling, we have the potential to allow students in one county to take classes that are only available in another and offer that same kind of credit. So there are things to be worked out for sure, and it is totally worth keeping an eye on what the State Board of Education is deciding. To the earlier asker, they adopted a resolution at their last meeting to make it so that next school year, all school systems have to go back in person. And they would have to request a waiver from the state in order to even offer virtual or hybrid schedules. So keep in touch with what's going on at the state level. You can do that by signing up at strongschoolsmaryland.org. But most importantly, this is a chance for opportunity. We are in the 21st century. Schools have to shift in order to accommodate the needs of students, and they're differentiated, as our hosts have outlined.
Yeah, and I'll add to what Ms. Gardner was saying, because she pointed out that especially for high school kids, it's a real opportunity through virtual to get classes not offered in their high school. But what we've found in the pandemic is that little kids really need to be at school, that it's hard to learn to read, it's hard to learn the sort of social skills you need to succeed in school. It's harder to learn those remotely. So it seems like it would be a good approach if you gave high school students, maybe middle school students, more latitude, but had more traditional instruction for the little kids.
All right, thank you. Tyrone, was that pretty much it? Okay. Ms. Gardner, this is a question to both of you, Ms. Gardner and Ms. Jordan. Ms. Gardner, you did mention strongschools.org. Our question is, how can families influence spending priorities?
Yes, this is my favorite question. So the easiest way to do it, and I recognize like this is a pandemic, life goes on, people are dealing with things. Like if you're watching this right now, you're amazing. If you want a very low lift way of knowing what is going on at the state level, who is making decisions, what are opportunities for action in your community, and you want to be connected to other people who care, go to strongschoolsmaryland.org, join our email list. Right now, we're in the process of cultivating design sessions. We're talking to community members, including our team leaders from across the state, saying, what is a concern for you now? Now that we know the blueprint is passed, now that we know that federal funding is on the way, what do we need from our schools? What is happening now? Where should our attention be? And that is an opportunity not only to have your voice heard immediately and possibly carried through by other people, but also to get connected with resources. And if you are ready to engage more and you have time, like join us, become a team leader reach out to your superintendent, reach out to whoever leads your local board of education, request a meeting, and talk about the issues that are important to you.
Well, and I'll add to that, just 2 weeks ago, the education department put out this plan. Show it to you. It's really long, but it says that states can reserve 10% of the money for their own use. States have to submit a state plan by June 7th to say how they're planning to spend the money. And they have to do it with a robust input from students, teachers, in the community. So that's I don't know how, I haven't read of how states are responding to that request, but that could be an opportunity to have your voice heard in that process. And the same plan says that local districts need to send their plans to the state within 90 days of receiving the American Rescue Plan money, which would put them doing that sometime in the fall, probably. But that's another, and they also need to have robust input. So that's another thing to watch for. I haven't read much about how folks are responding to this, but it could be a process that would be a way to get your viewpoints out there.
Thank you both. Ms. Gardner, I have to follow up with you because I'm sure you're probably aware of how Baltimore City Public School parents are trying to be as involved as they possibly can, and they're running up against, I would describe it as fierce opposition in board meetings or in any kind of way to voice their opinions. What can be done? Has your organization kind of watched these things unfold, and what can be done with the parents who really are speaking out about this? And it is a variety, Ms. Jordan. I didn't mean to say that the younger scholars don't need and don't want, and parents, for them to come back. But it seems to me, Ms. Gardner, that when we talk about Baltimore City parents trying to gain voice with Baltimore City public school systems in the district, they are unheard.
Yeah, so it is an unfortunate reality that sometimes when you go to make your voice heard, the person you're trying to appeal to is not interested in listening. What we do, our method of organizing is based around power. We have to understand where power lies, and we believe that people getting together and making their voices heard at meetings and writing letters, etc., that kind of engagement is a form of power. But there are other levels. There is like situational power if you have a systemic position, if you are in elected office. If you are a superintendent of a school system, you have power. And then, of course, there's economic power. It is worth looking around and recognizing where you can join your power up with the power of others. And that is what Strong Schools Maryland, in part, continues to exist to do, to ensure that, the folks who have day-to-day lives and really, really urgent things to address, but also understand that need to engage systemically, have that resource to get information, get in and out quickly, take actions and move forward. The thing I would recommend is engaging with who we know our powerful allies are. At the local level, we know that Zeke Cohen is a former teacher and has been a champion on issues related to funding city schools, as have many other members of the city council. We know that at the state level, Delegate Smith and Senator McCray have been leading the way for Baltimore City. So if there is an opportunity to engage in multiple levels of dialogue for community members to really get their voices heard, one, know that it is possible, and two, join up with folks who can help you leverage your power.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Tyrone, anything from the family?
Yes. How can we avoid Baltimore City public school systems from just doubling down on ELA and math, English and language arts and math, at the expense of music and arts? Other districts send home instruments and also continued music instructions while online.
Ms. Jordan, are you able to? I know you're not localized.
No, I don't know. There's nothing in the federal rules that would stop that from happening.
Mhm.
There is a big emphasis on, and this isn't arts education, but on mental health and on social emotional learning and making sure that those needs are met. So in that sense, it's not all academic, but there is no reflection of arts in the process. Do you know, Ms. Gardner, whether there's anything that's in the Kerwin?
Yeah. So that's a great question. One, like in the blueprint, there's nothing about dictating curricula exactly. In terms of usage of the federal funds, I think decisions again are being made at the State Board of Education level, and the plans that they have to report on to the federal government, and then also at the local school system level and their plans to the state about how they want to spend that money and where the investment is going to go. And of course, everyone's going to say like reading and math, because that's what like all funding incentives are based around. It is again that mode of power and letting people know, hey, we're here, we're watching, and we actually want this. Another thing that I would look into is also, again, partnering with organizations that have that investment. If arts education is critical to you and you don't feel that you're getting what you need, Arts Every Day is in Baltimore City, as is Arts Education in Maryland Schools, a statewide organization, and they have connections to programs and resources that can supplement education. I think that's one of the things we also have to look at with summer as well, is like, this isn't summer school time, this is summer learning. Learning happens in all forms, in classrooms, not in classrooms, and there's different ways to go about it. So we should really invest in our after school programs too.
Well, and I was just about to say, I was doing some research last week on summer learning, and there's a great program in Baltimore. I think it's called SALA, S-A-L-A. And they do summer learning by, they have a teacher and an artist in the classroom, and they sort of use art to teach kids English language and math. So there's ways you can integrate it. And summer is a great time to do this too, but it ought to be part of this full year curriculum.
Yes, I was going to say that. You know, SEL takes many forms, you know, music, art, all of those things that tap into a student's emotional intelligence that enhances their academic intelligence. I agree with that, should be part of, you know, the daily education, in my humble opinion. I have a follow-up for Ms. Gardner, but Tyrone, I'll yield to you if there's anything else.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. They're having discussion. They're having this. They're having a discussion. They're talking about something about when we mentioned about parents and not listening, and Heidi's commenting on how the district isn't listening to parents and teachers and those who they, you know, should be. So, you know, it's conversation going on. But y'all continue to put your direct questions in if you have a question for either Ms. Gardner or Ms. Jordan that y'all would like to ask around this money that is coming in from the federal government, or you know, how you should be interact with the state with those, you know, this money, those kind of questions. Bring it in. Someone did have a question about, again, why did the city budget get cut? I don't know if, I mean, Shamoya may, you know, want to address that in some ways and talking about that some stuff, but you know, that's not directly, you know, towards, you know, this money here, what this is dealing with, but it, you know, there's a question on why did the city cut the budget? And I know we talked about on one show, someone was saying because we were getting some federal funding, so that's the reason why we cut it.
But you can't, and Shmoy, I'd be interested in what the reality is. They can't cut too far because, as I said, there's this maintenance of effort clause where you can't just take away, you know, some money. You have to maintain a certain level of funding, but it could be that it's below last year or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maintenance of effort is definitely a protective factor. I'm not going to pretend that I've been steeped in local budget issues. I will say that one concern I heard earlier on in the year is that there was confusion about the conditions of some federal funds, not the most recent, but the conditions of use when they would be eligible. I think if there was like a reimbursement clause in effect, at least some decisions might have been made because of miscommunications between the federal, state, and local levels that ended up with the city losing out on some funds. I do think that the Maryland delegation in Congress was working on ways to address that, because I don't think Baltimore City is the only city that might have struggled with that. But again, it's another issue.
Well, and I'll say too, one issue that Baltimore has where this money could really come in handy is ventilation and HVAC systems. I know you have a lot of facilities issues, and both of the most recent two packages specifically mention ventilation and HVAC systems fixes as an acceptable use. Now, again, it's a facility thing, and you have to do it in a certain period. And I know Baltimore has lost money in the past because they didn't move fast enough to make changes. So that's an issue for people to push for. I mean, there's a lot of schools that need better heating, better air conditioning, and just better quality air with this airborne virus.
Yeah, and a part of the reason why Baltimore City has lost out on capital funding in the past is because of the way it's structured. You know, Baltimore City is a low wealth jurisdiction. A lot of these projects require a certain amount of upfront cash, and in the time that it takes to get all of the money and then get quotes, prices change, and sometimes we end up not qualifying for those dollars. That is an overarching problem, I think, that we see happen with different levels of government interacting with one another, and lines of communication being a little stymied. One thing that I do want to bring to the conversation that's really great news is that when the legislature overrode the governor's veto of the blueprint, that also overrode the governor's technical veto of the Built to Learn Act, which invests hundreds of millions of dollars over a period I'm not going to pretend I'm super familiar with, because I'm not a capital advocate, but it is another large investment in capital construction projects, specifically in Baltimore City, I believe Frederick, Prince George's, Montgomery County, and a whole lot of other projects in the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland as well. That, I think it's about $400 or $500 million per year, may be able to be leveraged with the federal funding that Dr. Jordan was talking about, so that the time constraints on one might flow into another. And if that is not what happens, we ought to demand that they make the fix.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, for me, it both of you spoke exactly to what I was going to ask, because between the CDC, well, actually, even I won't even mention the CDC right now. Prior to COVID-19, Ms. Gardner, I know you can attest to it. Ms. Jordan, I don't know how much you know about the city of Baltimore City, the history, excuse me, of Baltimore City Public Schools infrastructure, physical infrastructure, but they were in horrible shape.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're a student or a teacher in a handful of schools that are really, really nice or 21st century, you know, the system as a whole had glaring issues with the physical makeup of these schools.
Yeah.
And one of the things that parents were saying, and still are saying, and I'm glad they're still crying out and saying, well, the schools were not healthy prior to COVID-19. You know, so subsequent to all of these things, you know, it's one of the things that still bothers parents, that they're sending their kids back, or having to send their kids back to school buildings that have not seen improvement, or maybe Band-Aid like improvement because of COVID-19 protocols. So I'm glad you all both addressed that issue. Tyrone, was there anything else on the line?
Let me guess. I will a question. I know it was addressed a little bit earlier, but in reference to virtual learning, I understand the benefits of virtual learning, the virtual, you know, some type of virtual academy. But if 50 kids were to leave a school that say had about 300 kids, that per pupil funding reduction would be really significant. And you know, what do you all think that? I mean, if that was to happen, do y'all think that would have an impact on the in-person experience?
Yeah. I mean, especially at the high school level, where if you don't have a critical mass of kids, it's hard to offer some of the electives. And as you point out, I mean, if you had a citywide academy versus a statewide academy, the city would still maintain that per pupil funding, but the school would not. So I don't have a good answer for you. You make a really good point.
I think a good question within that is how we determine the future of allocating funding for the purpose of education. I'm gonna steal a quote from someone I heard earlier today. Are we like funding school buildings, or are we like funding the education of students?
Mhm.
Where's the money actually trying to go? Because it is possible, again, like all things are possible right now. We're at a crossroads. It is possible to create a system of virtual education in which students are like tied to a home school and then able to access whatever course materials they need to. That could potentially bring down costs and allow for pupil funding to remain in some amount at a physical school to facilitate the learning and needs of the folks who are physically in the building, if anyone needs to physically be in the building. I think the concern is right. We do need to ensure that students who have been disinvested in for generations get the investment that they deserve. But I think that we ought not to have a scarcity mindset about what is possible in the world of virtual learning. Like computers aren't going anywhere. The internet is not going anywhere. So we have to be as open as possible and remember that like there is no shortage of funding. It is a scarcity mindset that folks allow us to play into, but we saw with the pandemic how much money government is willing to invest in public education in order to keep the system afloat. We have to remember that.
Wow. I'm sorry.
Can anyone speak to what would be a good strategy for boosting enrollment, being as though federal and state funding is based on per pupil funding? Enrollment is we're losing population. So could anyone?
Well, I would say there's an immediate need on enrollment, which are the kids who sort of dropped off the rolls this past year. Nationwide, they're saying something like 3 million fewer kids to overall enrolled in school. So you need to get those kids back. There's some of them are older kids who just are sort of dropping out of school, and you can try to get those kids back. Some of them are little kids whose parents decided to redshirt them and keep them out a year because they didn't want to go to kindergarten in remote setting, which I could certainly understand. But next year you're going to have kindergarten with 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, and it's going to be an issue. So you want to make sure that everyone who should be enrolled is enrolled. Then in getting more of your Baltimore City students to go to Baltimore schools, to me, it's getting the quality of the schools up, and hopefully with this infusion of cash, you can make a difference there. And it's the facilities too, as you said, William, they're in bad shape, and so all these things about improving schools can improve enrollment.
I want to jump in real quick, Ms. Gardner, and just say that your last point is what I've been trying to articulate for the longest time so wonderfully and beautifully, because it was a choice. You're right. Crossroad. I mean, I could not have said it better myself. The district, really the country was at a crossroads of how do we navigate going forward. Here's a perfect opportunity to invest online and virtual infrastructure. We have said it on this show here. I know TDP, anybody associated with TDP is tired of hearing me say that I felt Baltimore City should have invested for not only for the kids, but it was an opportunity to teach parents how to be virtual teachers of their children at home, which would assist in the classroom, teach students. Our students in the cities are behind, and also help educators or people that are lacking virtual skills, such as myself, put myself at the top of the list. But I just want to say thank you for articulating something that I've been trying to articulate. Tyrone, I know the people are tired of me. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Gardner.
No, I appreciate that. And there have been folks who like do advocacy in other sectors, like in workforce development, who are like, hey, digital divide. What are we doing? Like there's synergies here that are possible. Back to the last question that Tyrone asked. I'm trying to remember exactly what the question
About
was.
enrollment, getting enrollment up.
Yes, and it was your point, Dr. Jordan, that many of the things we've been talking about on this call are what is going to be necessary in order to make sure that enrollment will continue in whatever capacity that needs to look like in the future. If it is like in person, then schools need to be offering the very services that students and families are like, yes, I'm willing to leave my house to go be there to get that because it is valuable. Like so many people have said it before the pandemic, it wasn't great. What are we really asking students to go back to? What are we asking families to send their children back to? Is it going to be like it was before with school discipline, where like Black students are suspended at least twice the rate of their white peers? Because now we can put kids in virtual in-school suspension. Like, what is it that we are asking people to come back to? Yes, it's a numbers game. Yes, enrollment matters. Yes, school systems have to be funded in order to yield the results we want, but they also have to like be offering what it is the community says they need, and they have to be supported in being able to make those offerings. And that's why the systemic level engagement matters.
And I will say personally, I have witnessed what in-school learning looks like. It is paltry. And a lot of my students that I've spoken to are not happy. I don't know what they expected. I don't know what their parents expected, but it is not a thriving, bustling classroom with scholars collaborating with one another and thought. It's a very, very, the word that comes to mind is just a very sterile environment. And I'm talking about educators that are doing their very best to make it engaging.
That's
But
exactly what I was going to say. It is Teacher Appreciation Week. Like, we know they have been going for the last year, basically without breaks. I live with 2 teachers. It is rough, but I don't know if we really want like just people back in school so things can feel normal, or if we really want to find that way forward.
I'm hoping that with some of this funding, especially some of the social emotional learning, mental health, that there's more attention to school climate and creating a good environment in the schools, not just in Baltimore, but everywhere that, we've read a lot about kids having mental health issues at home, that this is a wake-up call, that schools matter for that, and that there's a real concentrated effort to improve it.
thank you both. And I'm sorry, Tyrone, I got to say that to your point, Ms. Jordan, uh, some parents and administrators and those of us that really care about some of these scholars that were in very desperate situations at home were not happy with the district's response to their in attendance. It was almost treated as a blanket. Oh, well, they don't want to get online. Tyrone said, a couple of other people have said, well, are we making house calls? Are we sending our SEL team to knock on doors to see exactly what is happening with these parents, what these students, there's a lot to be said for that. And I think that gets lost, that this is not something that the kids designed. This is not something that the parents designed. This wasn't a free for all. We won the lottery for the last year. This was extremely difficult, and not just in the classroom, on all of these families. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that the student is not just affected, but also the families, the neighborhoods, the communities, and indeed, our country. So just a wonderful point I wanted to highlight there, Ms. Jordan. Tyrone, anything else before we wrap up, my friend?
Know about it. We do have another question that I am going to throw out there, and just to get advice from others, and that is, do we think that Baltimore City public school systems will ever move to a centralized budgeting approach and pull back principal autonomy so we can equitably allocate resources?
Let's go, Ms. Gardner. Let's go, Ms. Jordan.
I'll let Ms. Gardner take it. I don't know enough.
I am woefully underinformed. I just,
Sorry.
Baltimore City, like that just doesn't feel like us, does it? I hope not. I don't know. Maybe we need more information.
Yeah, I know I live in DC. I know that in DC, they've gone to that principal. They have that principal approach at some schools, but not others. Um, but I can't tell you whether it's successful or not. There are people who swear by it, but it sounds like it's not working in Baltimore.
No, it's not. And I would say to the person that posed the question, number one, thank you. But number two, I don't believe that. I don't believe that the city is going to concede and not allow its principals to have used to be called the CEO model. I don't know what it's called now, but we are out of time. Tyrone, any last announcements before we thank our guests and say goodbye to our family?
As always, on Thursday at Parent Chat at Tyrone's house. Come back next Monday, and of course, and join us back here at Parent Power Hour. And yeah.
Miss Jordan, Miss Gardner, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all of the information, breaking it down for myself. I hope everyone else was as enlightened as myself with your responses and with your diligence and hard work. And strongschoolsmaryland.org, did I say that right, Miss Gardner? Yes. All right. Hey, I got it. Please join. You heard Miss Gardner say and obviously she is the face of Strong Schools, very astute, and we need that. We need more rallying points for our parents, our scholars, and of course, our teachers. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great talking to you all.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Family, we'll see you at Tyrone's house on Thursday. Miss Jordan, Miss Gardner, you can stop by virtually, of course, Tyrone's house, virtually, of course. And family, we'll see you there Thursday. And of course, as he said, next Monday, right back here on Parent Power Hour. Good evening.